In a world where platform bans can destroy careers, Adin Ross turned his controversies into a comeback story. But his rebrand wasn't loud or clean, it was calculated, strategic, and sometimes controversial. What did he do to rebuild his image after repeated bans? In the modern era of internet fame, few names have become as polarizing, unpredictable, and headline-worthy as Adin Ross. A creator whose rise seemed fueled by chaos, charisma, and constant controversy, Ross became one of the most watched streamers on the planet. But with that fame came consequences, bans, backlash, and repeated public criticism. Yet rather than disappear, he found a way to rebuild. This is the story of how Adin Ross rebranded after multiple platform bans. A story of reinvention, survival, and adaptation in the harshest corners of online culture. Adin Ross didn't start as a controversial figure. Like many creators, he began with a simple goal: entertain. He started streaming NBA 2K and gradually built a community of fans who loved his energy, his unpredictable reactions, and his ability to turn a simple gaming stream into a chaotic event. His content was not polished or scripted. It was raw, live, and full of moments that felt unfiltered and real. That authenticity made him popular, but it also made him dangerous in the eyes of platforms that demanded control. As Ross's popularity grew, so did his willingness to push boundaries. He began hosting controversial guests, sparking heated debates, and making comments that could easily cross the line. In a world where viewers reward shock value, Ross found success by being unpredictable. But in the world of platform moderation, unpredictability is a liability. The first major sign that his career was on a collision course with platform policies came when Ross began facing repeated suspensions on Twitch. These were not isolated incidents. They became a pattern: warnings, temporary bans, and constant scrutiny. Each time he returned, the same cycle continued. The intensity of his streams attracted huge viewership, but it also attracted the attention of moderators who were watching for violations. The line between entertainment and violation became increasingly blurred, and eventually, the platform's patience ran out. Then, in early 2023, the most consequential ban occurred. Twitch issued an indefinite suspension for Ross after he displayed an unmoderated chat containing racist and hateful messages. The ban wasn't just a punishment, it was a public statement. Twitch was signaling that even the most popular streamers were not immune from enforcement. For Ross, it was a moment of crisis. He had built his career on Twitch. He had built his identity on the platform. Losing that stage was like losing the center of his universe. For many creators, a permanent ban would be the end. But Adin Ross's story was never about fading away. It was about finding a new path. The ban forced him to confront a new reality. If he wanted to continue, he needed a new platform, a new audience, and a new identity. That new identity came in the form of Kick, a streaming platform that was gaining attention for its relaxed moderation policies and generous revenue model. For Ross, Kick represented a fresh start and a new kind of freedom. No longer bound by Twitch's strict enforcement, he could create content that felt more unfiltered, more extreme, and more chaotic, exactly the kind of content his audience craved. On Kick, Ross's viewership skyrocketed. He quickly became one of the platform's biggest stars, and his streams became major events. The move also changed his public image. He was no longer the Twitch streamer who got banned. He was now the pioneer of a new platform. The ban had become a story of rebellion and resilience rather than a moment of failure. However, the move to Kick also exposed the limits of his previous strategy. While the platform allowed him more freedom, it also increased the risk of further controversies. Ross's content continued to push boundaries. His fans loved it, but critics warned that his streams were becoming a dangerous spectacle. The same elements that fueled his success, shock value, unpredictable behavior, and controversial guests, also kept him in constant conflict with the public and with platform rules. At the same time, Ross's reputation began to shift. His audience grew younger and more devoted, but the criticism became more intense. He became a symbol of what some saw as the darker side of internet culture, a creator who used controversy as a tool to drive views. The same energy that made him popular also made him a lightning rod for criticism. His name became synonymous with chaos, and his brand became tied to the idea that he was unbothered by consequences. This was the moment when Ross's rebranding began in earnest, not through a public apology or a dramatic transformation, but through subtle shifts in behavior and strategy. He began to focus on control. He started to moderate his community more carefully and to distance himself from the most toxic aspects of his fanbase. He recognized that the chaos that once defined him could also destroy him if it continued unchecked. One of the most telling moments of his rebranding came when he deleted his AR Loyals community on X. This group had been a central hub for his most devoted fans, but it was also a space that sometimes fostered toxicity and unfiltered behavior. By removing it, Ross signaled a desire to distance himself from the extreme elements of his audience. It was a quiet move, but it was significant. It showed that he was beginning to see his brand not just as a source of entertainment, but as a platform that required responsibility. This shift was not about becoming clean or safe. Ross didn't suddenly become a wholesome creator. Instead, he began to refine his image into something more sustainable. He started to understand that his future depended on long-term stability, not short-term shock value. As he continued on Kick, Ross began to diversify his content. He experimented with different formats and styles, focusing more on personality-driven streams rather than purely controversial moments. He started collaborating with other creators in a way that felt less chaotic and more intentional. These collaborations helped him rebuild his public image by associating him with creators who had more mainstream appeal. Slowly, he began to move away from the troll streamer identity and toward a more mature persona. Yet even as he tried to evolve, Ross couldn't escape the fact that controversy was still part of his brand. He remained a figure who attracted headlines, and he continued to be involved in public disputes. Some critics argued that his rebranding was only surface level, that he was still using controversy to drive engagement. But Ross's strategy was not to eliminate controversy entirely. Instead, he aimed to manage it more strategically. The next major shift came when Twitch announced a new system allowing streamers to appeal old bans after a certain period. This created a pathway for Ross to return to the platform he had once dominated. When Twitch eventually lifted his ban in 2025, it marked a new chapter in his story. His return was not a simple comeback, it was a reinvention. The Twitch unban was symbolic. It was not just about access to the platform, it was about legitimacy. Being allowed back on Twitch signaled that Ross had grown, or at least that the platform was willing to give him another chance. But the reality was different from his past success. His channel no longer had the same massive follower count, and the streaming landscape had changed. Ross had to rebuild his audience from scratch, but this time with a different identity. His return to Twitch also forced him to confront the need for a multi-platform strategy. He was no longer a creator who could rely on one platform to sustain his career. He needed to diversify his presence and his revenue sources. This new approach was a critical part of his rebranding. Ross was no longer defined by a single platform or a single audience. He became a creator who could exist across multiple ecosystems, adapting to whatever platform offered him the best opportunity. This shift also reflected a deeper understanding of his own image. Ross began to speak more openly about the emotional toll of his lifestyle. He discussed the pressure of constant scrutiny and the stress of maintaining a high-energy persona for millions of viewers. He acknowledged that the chaotic version of himself was not sustainable forever. This vulnerability added a new layer to his public image. It made him more relatable, and it helped soften the harsh edges that had previously defined him. Another important part of his rebranding was the way he handled conflicts with other creators. Instead of escalating disputes, he started to seek resolution and reconciliation. He realized that public feuds could damage his brand and limit his opportunities. By choosing to step back from some conflicts, Ross showed that he was no longer interested in being known as a streamer who constantly fought with others. He was trying to be seen as a professional. Despite all these changes, Ross's rebranding was not perfect. He still faced criticism and controversy, and some of his old habits resurfaced at times. But the key difference was that he was now more aware of the consequences. He had learned that the internet can be both a source of fame and a source of destruction. His new strategy was to keep his audience engaged without allowing the chaos to consume him. In the end, Adin Ross's rebranding is not a story of complete transformation. It is a story of evolution. He didn't become someone else. He became a more controlled version of himself. He learned to navigate the dangers of online fame, to manage his community, and to build a career that could survive bans, backlash, and shifting platforms. Adin Ross's journey is a reflection of the modern internet era. In a world where platforms can ban you, audiences can turn on you, And controversies can destroy you overnight. The ability to adapt is the greatest survival skill. Ross didn't just survive his bans, he used them as an opportunity to redefine himself. And in that sense, his story is not just about controversy. It is about resilience. It is about the ability to reinvent, to rebuild, and to continue moving forward even when the world seems to be closing the door. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this.